Ambassador Lee Hana's hands trembled slightly as she stood in the massive chamber of the Xenological Institute. The space station Kepler orbited a dying star, its light casting eerie shadows through the transparent aluminum walls. Around her, representatives from dozens of alien species filled the amphitheater-style seating, their various forms creating a bizarre carnival of galactic life. The Vorthak Council members towered above everyone else, their crystalline bodies reaching nearly 3 meters in height. Their surfaces shifted through colors that had no names in human language, each hue carrying meaning that the translation devices struggled to interpret. Behind them, the slug-like meridians oozed slowly across specially designed platforms, their tentacles twitching with what Hana had learned to recognize as barely contained amusement. Earth seeks full membership in the Galactic Council, Hana began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. As part of our cultural presentation, I'd like to share some of humanity's oldest stories. The holographic projector hummed to life, filling the center of the chamber with a magnificent Chinese dragon, its serpentine body coiling through clouds of fire. The creature's eyes blazed with ancient wisdom as it soared through digital skies, its scales catching light like precious gems. A series of chirps and clicks erupted from the insectoid zephyrite in the upper galleries. Dr. Park Min-ho, standing beside Hana, recognized the sounds as their version of snickering. His jaw tightened as he watched the delegates' reactions. "This is the dragon," Hana continued, maintaining her professional composure despite the growing murmur of amusement. "In human culture, dragons represent power, wisdom, and the forces of nature itself. They breathe fire, control storms, and guard ancient treasures." Council leader Vexthul's crystalline form pulsed a deep amber color that the translation matrix interpreted as condescending patience. "Ambassador Hana," his voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm. "Surely you don't expect us to believe your ancestors encountered such theatrical creatures." The hologram shifted, displaying a phoenix rising from a bed of flames, its wings spread wide as golden fire cascaded from its feathers. The bird's cry echoed through the chamber, hauntingly beautiful and utterly impossible. "The phoenix," Hana explained, "represents rebirth and renewal. When it dies, it burns itself to ash, only to rise again stronger than before." These stories taught us about resilience, about overcoming impossible odds. A wet, gurgling sound came from the Meridian section. Their chief delegate, Glixmore, extended several tentacles in a gesture Hana recognized as dismissive. The translator struggled with the pheromone-based language before producing words. Charming fairy tales for younglings, perhaps, but hardly the foundation for serious galactic citizenship. The display changed again, this time showing a massive kraken emerging from turbulent seas, its tentacles, each thicker than ancient trees, wrapped around sailing ships as its beak crushed hulls like paper. The creature's eyes, dark as the ocean depths, seemed to stare directly at the alien delegates. "The kraken ruled the deepest waters of our homeworld," Hana said, her voice gaining strength. "Sailors spoke of tentacles that could reach from the ocean floor to drag down the mightiest vessels. It taught us respect for forces beyond our understanding." The chamber erupted in what could generously be called laughter. The Nexari, a hive-minded species that resembled a cross between beetles and computers, buzzed in perfect unison. Their collective consciousness found human mythology particularly amusing, apparently. Dr. Park Min-ho stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and growing anger. "These aren't just stories," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made several delegates pause their ridicule. "They're cultural memories that shaped our entire civilization." Vexthul's crystalline body flickered through several rapid color changes, the Vorthak equivalent of rolling one's eyes. "Dr. Park, with respect, your species has demonstrated remarkable achievements in technology and space travel. But these primitive fantasies suggest a fundamental disconnect from reality. How can we trust a species that still believes in fire-breathing lizards to contribute meaningfully to galactic governance?" The Zephyrite clicked their approval, their compound eyes glittering with metallic amusement. One of their delegates, speaking through a mechanical translator attached to its thorax, added, "Perhaps humans should focus on actual science rather than bedtime stories. Hana felt the weight of humanity's hopes pressing down on her shoulders. Earth had worked for decades to reach this moment, to prove they deserved a place among the stars. Now their oldest traditions were being dismissed as childish nonsense. "These stories have guided us through our darkest times," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. "They taught us to face the unknown, to believe in forces greater than ourselves, to never give up hope even when everything seemed lost." Glixmore's tentacles writhed in what might have been consideration. "Noble sentiments, Ambassador, but the galaxy operates on facts, not feelings. Your mythology reveals a species still grappling with imaginary fears rather than real challenges." Council. Leader Vexthal's form brightened to a decisive blue. "The Galactic Council appreciates Earth's application. However, these presentations of primitive folklore only confirm our assessment that humanity requires additional centuries of development before achieving the maturity necessary for membership." The rejection hung in the air like a physical weight, crushing humanity's dreams with the dismissive laughter of beings who had never known wonder. The research vessel, Stellar Harmony, looked like a metal whale swimming through the endless darkness of space. Its hull stretched over 2 kilometers long, packed with laboratories, living quarters, and the most advanced scientific equipment the Galactic Council could provide. But right now, all that technology was screaming warnings that nobody wanted to believe. Dr. Kim Ji-won pressed her face closer to the sensor display, her breath fogging the screen as she watched impossible readings scroll past. The numbers made no sense. Energy signatures that should belong to living creatures were coming from a planet that registered as completely dead. She rubbed her tired eyes and checked the calibration for the 100th time. "Daeho, are you seeing this?" she called to her colleague across the cramped bridge. Dr. Choi Daeho looked up from his workstation, where holographic displays showed electromagnetic patterns that seemed to dance and writhe like living things. "The energy readings are off the charts," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's like the planet is breathing, but our life scanners show nothing, not even bacteria." Captain Oh Sumin stood at the ship's central command console, her experienced hands dancing across the controls as she guided their massive vessel through the treacherous void sector. Space here wasn't like the calm regions closer to Galactic Center. Here, gravity wells shifted without warning, and ancient stellar debris created maze-like passages that could crush unwary ships. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Kang Hyok from the navigation station, "we're approaching the target system, dropping to sublight in 60 seconds. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a solar system that defied explanation. 3 planets orbited a star that pulsed with unnatural rhythms, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of any celestial mechanics. The innermost world appeared dead, its surface a tapestry of browns and greys, but energy readings suggested something vast and powerful lurked beneath. Dr. Kethavar materialized beside the human crew, his crystalline body reflecting the eerie light from the view screen. The Vorthak scientist had insisted on joining this expedition personally, claiming he wanted to study primitive human superstitions in their natural environment. His presence still irritated the human crew members, especially after his dismissive comments at the council hearing 3 months ago. "Fascinating," Kethvar said, his voice carrying that same condescending tone that had grated on everyone's nerves since departure. "Your sensors are clearly malfunctioning. No world could generate such readings while remaining lifeless." Ji-won bit back her first response and instead pulled up the detailed scans. "Dr. Kethvar, I've run diagnostics on every system twice. The readings are accurate. We're detecting massive biological signatures from something that our life scanners can't identify." The Vorthak's crystalline form flickered through several colors, settling on a skeptical yellow. "Impossible. Our technology has catalogued every form of life in this galaxy. If your primitive instruments detect something we cannot, the fault lies in your equipment." Captain Oh Sumin felt her jaw tighten. 3 months of dealing with Kethvar's arrogance had worn her patience thin. "Doctor, our primitive instruments are the same ones that helped us map the hyperspace routes your people use daily." As the stellar harmony entered orbit around the mysterious planet, The ship's automated systems began their standard survey protocols. Hundreds of probe drones launched from the vessel's belly, spreading out like mechanical insects to scan every inch of the world below. The planet's surface told a story of violence that made even the experienced crew members uncomfortable. Massive gouges scarred the landscape as if something enormous had dragged claws across continents. Mountain ranges had been shattered into geometric patterns that seemed too precise to be natural, and everywhere, strange symbols were carved into the rock, symbols that made Dr. Park Min-ho's heart race with recognition. "Those formations," Ji-won whispered, pulling up geological surveys on her workstation. Her hands trembled slightly as she cross-referenced the patterns with Earth's ancient databases. "Daeho, look at this. These match descriptions from the old texts." Daeho moved to peer over her shoulder, his eyes widening as he saw the comparison data. Ancient Korean texts describing dragon lairs showed remarkably similar geometric patterns. Chinese legends spoke of territories marked by beings that could reshape the very earth. Even European myths described sacred sites with identical symbolic arrangements. "It's just coincidence," Kethavar declared, but his crystalline body had shifted to a nervous purple hue. "Your ancestors saw natural geological formations and invented stories to explain them. Primitive minds always seek patterns where none exist." Captain Osumin studied the tactical display as more probe data streamed in. The underground chamber network was vast, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels and caverns that seemed to follow an intelligent design. Whatever had lived here had created a civilization that spanned continents. "Prepare the landing party," she ordered. "Dr. Kethavar, since you're so confident about natural explanations, you can lead the surface expedition." The Vortex form brightened to an eager gold. "Excellent. Finally, we can put these human superstitions to rest with proper scientific investigation." 2 hours later, the landing shuttle Discovery detached from the mothership with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. The smaller craft held a dozen crew members, including the entire human science team and several alien specialists. Dr. Kethavar had insisted on bringing his own equipment, claiming human technology wasn't sophisticated enough for real scientific work. As they descended through the planet's thin atmosphere, the landscape below revealed its secrets in horrifying detail. The claw marks weren't erosion patterns. They were too deep, too precise, too deliberately placed. Some of the gouges stretched for hundreds of kilometers, as if something massive had used the entire continent as a scratching post. "Those aren't natural formations," Lieutenant Kang Hyok muttered from the pilot's seat. "Something made those marks, something big." The shuttle touched down near what appeared to be the largest chamber opening, a yawning cavern that descended into absolute darkness. The crew's portable lights barely penetrated a few meters into the depths, but their instruments detected vast spaces stretching far beyond their illumination. Dr. Kethavar stepped out of the shuttle first, his crystalline form casting rainbow reflections in the harsh artificial light. "Standard xenological protocols," he announced, activating his scanning equipment. "We'll catalog whatever primitive life forms once inhabited this dead world, then return with proper documentation of..." Yet another human mythological failure. But as the team set up their drilling equipment near the cavern entrance, none of them noticed the way the ancient symbols carved into the surrounding rocks had begun to glow with a faint, pulsing light, as if something deep below was finally beginning to wake up. The massive drilling machine roared to life with a sound that made the entire cavern shake. Its diamond-tipped bit, designed to pierce through the hardest materials in the galaxy, began boring into the ancient stone floor. Sparks flew in brilliant cascades as metal met rock that had remained undisturbed for thousands of years. Dr. Kethavar stood proudly beside the operation, his crystalline body pulsing with satisfied blue light. "Finally," he announced to the assembled team, "we'll have proper scientific evidence instead of human fairy tales." Kim Ji-won crouched beside her portable sensor array, watching the readouts with growing unease. The biological signatures were getting stronger with each meter they drilled. Deeper. Something was down there, something massive and very much alive. "Dr. Kethavar," she called out over the drilling noise, "the life signs are increasing exponentially. Whatever's below us is responding to our presence." The Vorthak scientist's form flickered with dismissive orange patterns. Residual electromagnetic echoes from ancient geological processes. Your equipment simply isn't sophisticated enough to differentiate between actual life signs and natural phenomena. Park Min-ho studied the walls around them, his headlamp illuminating symbols that made his hands shake. The ancient Korean texts his grandmother had shared with him as a child described markings exactly like these. Dragon script, she had called it, the written language of the great serpents that once ruled the skies. These aren't random carvings, he whispered, tracing one of the symbols with trembling fingers. The stone felt warm under his touch, almost alive. They're warnings, instructions. They're telling us to stay away from what's sleeping below. Dr. Velzak, one of the slug-like Meridian researchers, oozed closer to examine the markings. His tentacles secreted analytical enzymes that could break down and identify any material. Fascinating mineral composition, he gurgled through his translator. The stone contains traces of elements that don't exist on any known periodic table. Suddenly, the drilling machine's roar changed pitch. The bit had broken through into empty space below. Lieutenant Kang Hyok, operating the controls, looked up with excitement. "We've hit a chamber! It's huge! The sonar can't find the far walls." Dr. Kethvar's crystalline form blazed with triumphant gold. "Excellent. Lower the exploration probe. Let's see what Dragon's Lair actually looks like when proper science investigates it." The probe descended on a fiber optic cable, its powerful lights piercing the darkness below. The images that appeared on their monitors made everyone fall silent. The chamber stretched beyond their probe's illumination range, its ceiling supported by massive stone pillars, carved to look like coiled serpents. Ancient braziers lined the walls, their metal still gleaming despite millennia of abandonment. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Yextai, an insectoid zephyrite specialist. "The architectural sophistication rivals our greatest cities. What species could have built this so long ago?" Park Min-ho's blood ran cold as he recognized more symbols covering every surface. "We need to leave," he said urgently, backing away from the drilling site. "Right now. These symbols, they're not decorations. They're containment spells." Before anyone could respond to his warning, the ancient chamber began to glow. A sound erupted from the depths that no translation device could interpret, a roar that seemed to come from the planet's very core. The stone floor beneath their feet cracked and split as something enormous stirred to life far below. "Seismic activity," Jiwon shouted, checking her instruments as they went wild. "Something's moving down there, something massive." Dr. Kethvar's certainty wavered for the first time as his own sensors began screaming warnings. "This is impossible," he muttered, his crystalline body flickering between colors of confusion and fear. No life form could have survived dormant for so long. The chamber erupted in flames that weren't flames, pure energy that burned without consuming, light that carried heat beyond measurement. What rose from those depths defied every law of biology the Galactic Council had established over millions of years of study. Scales caught and reflected the cavern lights like living mirrors, each one the size of a warrior's shield. A serpentine neck longer than their shuttle stretched upward, supporting a head that belonged in humanity's oldest nightmares and most sacred legends. Eyes like molten gold fixed on the tiny figures above, ancient intelligence burning in their depths. When it spoke, the voice resonated through frequencies that made the translation matrices struggle and spark. The words that emerged were in dialects so old that Earth's own computers had to dig through archaeological databases to interpret them. "The descendants return," it rumbled, each word carrying the weight of eons. "The compact is remembered." Wings unfolded with the sound of tearing reality, spanning the entire width of the vast chamber. The creature's presence filled the space with power that made their instruments overload and fail. Dr. Velzak and his Meridian colleague, Dr. Hicksmore, had no time to scream. The dragon's breath, not fire but something far more terrible, struck them instantly. They simply ceased to exist, their molecular structure unraveled by forces that shouldn't be possible. "Run!" Captain Oh Sumin's voice cracked through their comm units from the shuttle above. "Everyone back to the surface now!" The remaining team scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Dr. Yextai's insectoid legs carried him toward the exit with chittering panic, while the human researchers grabbed what equipment they could and ran for their lives. But Dr. Kethvar stood, frozen, his worldview crashing down around him like broken crystal. Everything he had believed about the universe, about the impossibility of human myths, about the superiority of galactic science, all of it crumbled in the face of golden eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall. The dragon's massive head turned toward him, studying the crystalline being with something that might have been amusement. "Your people laughed," it said in those ancient human tongues. "They found our existence entertaining." Behind the great beast, other shapes stirred in the chamber's depths, smaller dragons, beings of living flame, creatures that matched every impossible detail of humanity's most fantastic legends. "How?" Kethavar whispered, his voice barely functioning through his damaged translator. "We never left," the dragon replied, its voice carrying sadness older than stars. "We simply waited for the children to return home." As alarms blared and the research team fled toward their shuttle, Dr. Kethavar finally understood that humanity's rejection by the Galactic Council hadn't been about primitive superstitions at all. It had been about forces beyond their comprehension finally stirring to wakefulness, drawn by the return of the only species that had ever truly known them. The research station's emergency lights cast eerie red shadows across the barricaded central hub. Heavy metal tables, filing cabinets, and equipment racks had been dragged against the main entrance, creating a desperate fortress against the nightmares stalking the corridors outside. The survivors huddled together, their breathing shallow and quick as inhuman sounds echoed through the ventilation system. Dr. Kim Ji-won's fingers flew across her tablet, sweat dripping onto the screen as she scrolled through ancient databases that had been dismissed as mythology for centuries. Her archaeological program was designed to analyze cultural patterns, but what she was finding defied everything she had been trained to believe. "Captain O," she called out, her voice cracking with exhaustion and terror. "I need you to see this." "Captain." Oh Sumin looked up from the communications console where she had been desperately trying to reach the stellar harmony. Static filled the speakers, punctuated by sounds that made everyone's skin crawl, roars that seemed to come from creatures the size of spaceships. "The comm array is damaged," Sumin reported grimly. "Something tore through the external antennas. We're completely cut off." A sound like breaking glass echoed from somewhere deeper in the station. Dr. Yextai, the insectoid Zephyrite who had barely escaped the dragon's chamber, clicked his mandibles nervously. "That was the hydroponics lab," he chittered through his translator. "Something's hunting systematically through every section." Dr. Kethvar sat slumped against the far wall, his crystalline body so dim it was almost invisible. The proud Vorthak scientist who had mocked human legends now looked like a broken prism, his confidence shattered along with his understanding of reality. In the past 3 hours, he had watched colleagues torn apart by creatures that shouldn't exist according to every principle of galactic science. "Dr. Kethvar," Ji-won said gently, approaching him with her tablet, "I need you to look at this. Your people's astronomical records go back further than anyone else's. Can you verify these star charts?" The Vorthak slowly raised his head, his internal light flickering weakly as he focused on her screen. Ancient star maps filled the display, showing trade routes and colony markers spanning the entire galaxy. But these weren't recent. The stellar positions indicated they were thousands of years old. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice barely registering through the translation matrix. "These show a galactic civilization that predates the oldest known species by millennia. No one had faster-than-light travel that long ago." Park Min-ho crawled over to join them, keeping low as something massive moved past the barricaded door. Through the cracks, they could see shadows that suggested tentacles the size of subway cars sliding along the corridor walls. "That's not the impossible part," Ji-won said, pulling up another file. "Look at the colony markers. Every single settlement is located at sites where humans later recorded mythological encounters, dragon sightings, phoenix nests, places where sea monsters were reported." The pieces began clicking together in Park Min-ho's mind, like a puzzle that had haunted humanity for generations. "We weren't alone on Earth," he breathed. "We were never alone. These creatures, they were our neighbors, our partners, maybe even our protectors." Captain Osumin studied the charts over their shoulders, her military training helping her spot patterns the others missed. "These trade routes," she said, pointing to interconnected lines spanning star systems, "they're not random. Someone was managing a vast interstellar civilization, and humans were part of it." Dr. Jiwon pulled up linguistic analysis programs, cross-referencing ancient human languages with the translation matrices they had recorded from the dragon's speech. The creature spoke in Proto-Korean dialects, languages so old we barely have records of them. But it wasn't just speaking to us, it was speaking to descendants. It knew who we were. A thunderous crash shook the entire station as something enormous collided with the outer hull. Through the reinforced windows, they could see stars being blotted out by shapes too large to comprehend. The translation computers worked frantically, trying to interpret sounds that seemed to come from the void itself. "Whale song," the computer announced in its mechanical voice. "Pattern matches historical recordings of Terran aquatic mammals, but scaled up by factor of 10,000. Lieutenant Kang Hyok, who had been monitoring their remaining sensors, looked up with fear in his eyes. "Captain, something's approaching from the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts, moving in formation. They're huge." The view screen flickered to life, showing shapes emerging from the cosmic debris field. Tentacles longer than battleships writhed through space, guided by intelligence that had waited eons for this moment. The creatures moved with purpose, heading directly for planets where human colonies had been established. "The Kraken," Park Min-ho whispered, recognizing the forms from ancient maritime legends. "But they're not sea creatures at all. They're space dwellers." Dr. Kethva's crystalline body suddenly flared with desperate brightness. "The Council must be warned," he said, struggling to his feet. "If these beings are real, if they're awakening across the galaxy, then every civilization is at risk. We underestimated humanity because we didn't understand what they were trying to tell us." Jiwon's archaeological program chimed with a discovery that made her blood run cold. "According to these records, the ancient civilization didn't just disappear," she said, her voice barely audible. "It went into hibernation. The mythological creatures weren't extinct, they were sleeping, waiting for some signal to wake up." "What signal?" Captain Oh Sumin asked, though she suspected she already knew the Kai. "Answer. Humans returning to space," Minho replied. "We're the key. Our presence in the galaxy is what's calling them back to consciousness." Outside the station, the void filled with sounds that had been silent for millennia. Phoenix cries that could melt starship hulls, dragon roars that shattered asteroids, and the deep resonant calls of creatures so vast they used planets as stepping stones. The emergency comm system suddenly crackled to life, with panicked transmissions from across the galaxy. Colony worlds reporting impossible sightings, shipping lanes disrupted by creatures from legend, and everywhere the same terrified questions. How could the humans have known? How could their primitive myths have been so accurate? Dr. Kethva stared at the chaos unfolding on their screens, finally understanding that humanity's rejection from the Galactic Council hadn't been about their unsuitability for membership. It had been about the other species' complete failure to recognize what humans really represented, the descendants of a civilization so advanced and powerful that its very legends could reshape reality. "They're all waking up," he whispered, watching as phoenix fire illuminated distant nebulae and dragon shapes soared between the stars. Every myth, every legend, every impossible creature humans ever described, they're all real, and they're all coming home. The moment had arrived. Admiral No Seung-min's fingers trembled as he activated the communication device that would change everything. For 3 years, while Earth burned under alien attacks, his secret fleet had waited behind the moon's dark side. "All ships, prepare for final phase," he whispered into his headset. The response came immediately from 12 different captains, their voices steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. Captain Kim Tae-hyung aboard the Steel Phoenix was the first to respond. "Admiral, weapons are charged and ready. Planet killer missiles locked onto hegemony homeworlds." "Copy that, Phoenix. Remember, We're not just fighting for Earth today. We're showing the galaxy what happens when you corner humanity. The alien war chief Balthok had made one crucial mistake. He thought humans were like other species the hegemony had conquered, quick to surrender when overwhelmed. But humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other, learning from every defeat, growing stronger from every loss. Admiral No's fleet burst from behind the moon like vengeful spirits. The alien ships, still focused on bombarding Earth's remaining cities, were caught completely off guard. These weren't the small fighters they'd been battling for months. These were massive warships, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Impossible. War Chief Balthok's voice crackled across all communication channels. Your species was primitive when we arrived. Where did these ships come from? Admiral No smiled coldly as his flagship, the Iron Mountain, moved into position. We've been building in secret for 50 years, waiting for someone like you. Did you really think we'd put all our defenses where you could see them? On Earth's surface, General Park Minseo watched the sky through his bunker's reinforced windows. Alien ships that had terrorized his people for months were now fleeing in panic, as humanity's hidden fleet unleashed hell upon them. All ground forces, this is General Park, he announced over the military network. Our boys upstairs just changed the game. Time to remind these invaders why they should have stayed home. The Korean Defense Forces, battered but unbroken, emerged from their hiding places. Soldiers who had been fighting building-to-building warfare for months suddenly had air support that made the aliens look like children with toy weapons. Captain Jung Se-hun, piloting his fighter through the chaos above Seoul, couldn't help but laugh as alien ships scattered like frightened birds. This is Red Wolf to all pilots. They're running. After all their talk about superior technology, they're running from us. But Admiral No wasn't finished. His planet-killer weapons weren't aimed at Earth. They were pointed at the hegemonies. 3 homeworlds, billions of light-years away. The quantum communication array allowed him to speak directly to the alien High Command. "Attention, Hegemony Supreme Council," he transmitted, his voice carrying across the galaxy instantaneously. "You sent War Chief Balthok to make humanity kneel. Instead, you've awakened something you can't control. Look at your homeworlds through your telescopes. See those bright lights approaching? Those are our gifts to you." The response came quickly, filled with panic. "You cannot. There are billions of civilians on our worlds." "Then you should have thought about our civilians before you attacked," Admiral No replied calmly. "You have 60 seconds to order a complete withdrawal from our solar system, or your homeworlds become memories." President Lee Myung-bak, speaking from his reinforced bunker beneath Seoul, added his voice to the transmission. "We tried diplomacy first. We offered trade, culture exchange, peaceful coexistence. You chose war instead. This is what war with humanity looks like." The alien war chief Balthok's ship was now limping away from Earth, its hull breached in dozens of places. "You were supposed to be primitives. Your technology was centuries behind ours." "We were never primitives," President Lee continued. "We were preparing. Every human fighting today comes from ancestors who survived ice ages, plagues, world wars and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. We don't give up. We learn, we adapt, and we remember." Captain Kim Tae-hyung's voice came over the fleet communication. "Admiral, hegemony ships are jumping to hyperspace. They're abandoning the battlefield." "Let them go," Admiral No ordered, "but make sure they remember what they saw here." General Park Min-seo, now standing on the roof of his command bunker, watched the last alien ships disappear into the void. Around him, his soldiers cheered as Korean flags were raised over the ruins of their cities. "All forces, this is General Park. The invaders are gone, but our work isn't finished. We rebuild, we grow stronger, and we make sure this never happens again." Captain Jung Se-hun, now orbiting Earth in formation with the secret fleet, opened a final transmission to the galaxy. His words would travel to every inhabited system, carried by the same quantum network the aliens had used to coordinate their invasion. To any species listening across the stars, this is humanity speaking. We are Earth's children, and we are Korea's sons and daughters. We offered you friendship, and you brought us war. Remember what you've seen today. We don't conquer for conquest's sake, but we will defend our home with everything we have. Choose your next move very carefully, because we'll be watching. The war was over, but humanity's message echoed across the galaxy long after the last alien ship had fled.